Hi guys, and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News and Talk. I'm really glad that you enjoyed the last episode so much, and since then a lot has actually happened. I'm hearing a few whispers that we might be seeing a few new cameras and lenses towards the first week of March. So could that actually mean we're going to see the long-awaited R7, a 1.6 APS-C crop camera in like an R6 body with eye tracking and 4K 60 video at a reasonable price by maybe $2,000, maybe $2,500? I know a lot of you would really love a camera like that, but it's also possible that we see more of like a smaller camera that merges the RF line with like the M series. I guess we'd have to wait and see, but it would be very exciting to see an R7 with a 1.6 crop, maybe 24 to 32 megapixels that you combine with something like a 100 to 500 and get some amazing walk around combo for bird photography. And if you are a bird photographer but maybe not quite sure how to make your own bird images look absolutely amazing so they stand out from the crowd, I would highly recommend that you check out my PROSETS and Masterclass down there in the description. It will help you tremendously to achieve the bird images of your dreams. To me, what an R7 would have to be very interesting. Obviously, crop factor, decent megapixels, probably around the 30 megapixel range. Good noise performance. Would definitely have to have eye tracking and decent video capabilities. I think then at a fair price point, it would be an absolute no-brainer for many people, including me as a third body probably. In that regard, it's also interesting to read that Canon has been starting to discontinue more and more EF and EFS lenses. The writing is definitely on the wall for the end of the DSLR era. It doesn't mean DSLRs don't work anymore, they're a bad camera or you have to sell your DSLR cameras, but it means that Canon will more and more focus on the RF lenses. Interestingly though, they're still producing most of the EF-M lenses, so the M series cameras still have basically their full lineup available, so that could mean that there might also be another M series camera coming out in the future. I've been trying to buy a few things, microphones and some sound recorders, but it's been very difficult. And a friend of mine is trying to get a Nikon Z9 here in Australia, and the closest bid he was getting was about 10 weeks away from now, and only because someone who pre-ordered it was pulling out. And most other shots has been telling him that he will likely not get one before like December 2022, so almost a year away from now. That's pretty crazy. Hopefully, if you're looking to get in Z9, you have pre-ordered or have some other way of getting your hands on one, because it's kind of annoying to wait a year to get a hands on a new camera. And the same also seems to be true for the 2.8 400mm lens with a built-in 1.4 extender, where I've been reading that it also will be delayed for a lot of people by at least 6 months. The only lens that seems to be more readily available is actually the new Nikon 100 to 400mm lens that a lot of shops seem to have in stock. So I'm not sure if it's not as popular or if they just made more of these lenses anticipating a larger demand for them. But of course, it's not just Nikon. Canon has the same issues with a lot of the RF lenses not always in stock, but I've been hearing that the RF lenses should be more and more in stock over the next few months, but it's definitely still hard to get cameras like an R3 where they're still fulfilling pre-orders and a lot of people still waiting for their cameras, and there's basically no stock available anywhere in the world. Interesting times. I know in the end it doesn't really matter if you have some great cameras now, you can take great photos, but we all know if there's a new camera, you pre-ordered it, you always can't wait to get it. I've also been reading something else completely crazy on Canon rumors, and I wasn't sure if Canon was just taking the piss because all of us always joke about a lens like this, or if they're serious. There was a few patents they applied for. One of them included an f8 30 to 600mm lens. Now that's pretty crazy, isn't it? I know we always like to say, wouldn't it be great to have a lens that goes from really wide to really zoomed in and doesn't weigh much and doesn't cost much? Wouldn't it be cool if such a lens actually existed and we would see something like a 30 to 600mm lens with decent image quality, decent size and a decent price point? Probably never going to happen, but it's nice to dream about such a lens from time to time, isn't it? And I actually find it encouraging that it seems like behind the scenes Canon is at least working on creating more and more crazy lens designs that focus on having more flexibility and hopefully less size and weight, and ideally also less cost, but that actually seems to be going the other way, doesn't it? Talking about lenses, there also seem to be two more lens announcements imminent, probably also maybe at the beginning of March, a 5.6 800mm RF lens and an f8 1200mm RF lens. Now these are two kind of interesting lenses, but a few factors are really important when we look at these lenses. First of all, size and weight, and also minimum focusing distance for me, because The old 5.6 800mm lens, for instance, wasn't very fun to work in the field. It's heavy, it has a really bad minimum focusing distance, autofocus was kind of slow, so it's never a lens that I really enjoyed working with in the field. If there's an RF version coming out, it'd be very interesting to see how it performs. Obviously it should be lighter, much faster, and hopefully also with a much decreased minimum focusing distance. Now personally, I'm not the biggest fan of 800mm lenses because I think 600 is the ideal compromise for bird photography, because at times 800mm already feels a little bit long. But what do you think about an 800mm lens? Is that something you're interested in, or do you think it's just going to be a bit too pricey and a bit too inflexible? And that brings us to the f8 1200mm lens. Kind of an odd one for me, let's say, because I can't really think of that many purposes. And I know Canon in the past had like a massive, really expensive 5.6 1200mm lens. Of course, that lens was too expensive to be available to the public, but even that kind of lens was usually only used to photograph people giving a speech like really far away or something, and maybe some people used it for wildlife. But generally I would think that 1200mm as your base focal length is pretty long. So in terms of bird photography, maybe if you're shooting a lot of shorebirds on a sunny beach, 1200mm f8 could be interesting. And I mean, let's spin this a bit further. You could probably put a 1.4 or 2 times extender on, get yourself an f16 2400mm lens. All in all, it's definitely great to see these kind of lenses coming up, and they have a decent wide, decent size, hopefully a decent price point with a decent minimum focusing distance. I think that could be at least quite interesting for a few people. What do you guys think? Where would people use a 1200mm lens? Like I said, personally, I'm not too sure where that would fit in, at least for the kind of photography that I'm doing. I also read this week that Sigma has been planning to add one more mount to their system in 2022. They didn't say which system it's going to be, but it could potentially be the RF mount, and that would be pretty awesome, wouldn't it? Because many of the popular lenses, like 150 to 600mm lens that many people use for bird and wildlife photography, have a few issues when they're adapted to a camera like an R5. So if they actually brought out a mirrorless version for the R5 that has perfect autofocus and perfect image stabilization, I think that could be a real winner for them and a lot of Canon shooters. You guys always say that I never talk about Olympus, or I shouldn't say Olympus anymore, I should say OM Digital or OM Systems, how they're called now after being taken over by JIP a couple of years ago maybe. And they've now launched their first new flagship camera under the new brand, the OM-1. Looking at the camera, it actually sounds like a pretty awesome camera with some great features. We have a stacked micro four thirds sensor, 20 megapixels. That seems to be the only disappointment in some of the reviews that I've seen, because it seemed like a lot of people were hoping for some more megapixels there. If you're an Olympus or OM Digital shooter, let me know in the comments, were you hoping for some more megapixels? And then interesting that we have up to 50 frames per second with continuous autofocus and metering, although that currently only works with 6 supported lenses. Otherwise, you have up to 25 frames per second with full autofocus and full metering. And if you want to go crazy, you also have 120 frames per second, but then you have fixed focus and no metering available. So I think that mode is only useful for certain applications. And the only other problem I saw on the spec sheet would be that the buffer is only about 95, 96 RAWs. So if you're shooting at 50 frames per second, you will hit the buffer in under 2 seconds. And if you're shooting at 120 frames per second, you will actually hit the buffer in less than a second. On top of all that, they also added a lot of tracking or eye tracking for many different subjects, including 3 different kinds of trains. So does that mean Olympus people are train spotters? All in all, it sounds like a great camera and an update for many Olympus or OM Systems shooters. And if you're one of them, are you looking at getting the camera? Because it definitely seems to have more abilities and speed, for instance, than like a EM1 Mark III or an EM1X. In the last early bird photo news, I also said that I had some trouble with the R5's overheating in Queensland all the time, and I was looking for a solution. And you're looking at the solution right now, a Ninja 5 that I've been using on my R5s now for a few videos, and I'm very happy to report that there are no issues at all anymore. I installed the Ninja on top, I plug in the HDMI to micro HDMI cord, attach it to the R5, and it starts filming, and I've been filming for more than an hour, basically continuously without any issues at all. So I'm super happy how that works. No more overheating issues. And the main reason the R5 seems to be overheating is the rear display and the EVF running all the time, because with the Ninja I can actually turn off the EVF and the screen. I set it to go to standby after 1 minute, and now neither the screen nor the EVF is actually running. And then with the Ninja recording I can still see myself, but all the EVFs and displays are off, so the camera's not overheating anymore. I can basically get unlimited video. On top of that, the Ninja has also been very helpful, for instance, in recording the menu for my last video about the R5 video settings, and I'm also looking forward to be recording the viewfinder with it. So all in all, I'm actually a little bit upset that I haven't bought the Ninja earlier, because it's such a fantastic tool and I'm really happy with it. So that was it with the early bird photo news and talk for today. I hope you enjoyed this video again, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys in one of the next episodes. And like always, please make sure to check out my PROSETS and masterclass down there in the description. Also make sure to leave me comments with your own thoughts, give me a thumbs up for the video, and I will see you guys in my next video very soon. Bye guys. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.